When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like aloe or skins, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers, buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. With Shop Pay, that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts are going abandoned and way more sales happening. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell whatever your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Skins uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
It's one thing to start a business, like if you've truly invented the new mousetrap or whatever, the new software trap, mousetrap, whatever. But I realize there's tens of millions of dollars of companies out there that are really well run with owners that are 60, 70 years old, got no one to sell it to, kids don't care, blah, 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 whatever. Like, there's just no way I was going to do it from scratch this time. The first two companies were startups, scratch, from no customers, no insurance, no bank, no money, no nothing, right?
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. My, oh my, what a journey Glenn Poulos has been on, and just sharing a little bit with me after I asked him many, many questions from looking at his websites, his LinkedIn, other things I was able to glean about Glenn. Thank you so much, first of all, for being on Your Brand Amplified.
Oh, thanks, Anika. It's great to be here.
And I'm looking forward to discussing your book, your multiple exits, moving to a new country so that you could avoid non-competes, and also dipping your toe into this new world of AI with an AI business. So
awesome.
Let's start with the beginning with your original companies and tell us about your journey.
Okay. So I usually start at the same way whenever I talk to people, is that, my journey into sort of sales and then business came about as a result of being a failed civil servant in Canada. And I got kicked out of the Canadian government for working too hard. And that's the joke I like to say. Anyways, like, my boss came to me and he says, I don't think you're cut out for the job here. I think, you'd probably be better served in a world of like sales or something like that. Right. And, that was over 40 years ago. So, but I took him at his word and I started looking for sales jobs. And shortly thereafter, I resigned my job as a civil servant, and I was working for Environment Canada doing electronic work. And I got a job working for a company selling electronics in the 1980s. And back then it was a lot of military stuff. And, there was just, computers were just coming around at that point, and there was just a wide variety of electronic projects to work on. And I worked for a company for about 5.5 years, and I realized that there was really good leverage for a salesperson, in going into sales. I kind of call it a cheat code for people that don't have higher education. And I know you have plenty of it, and you're a professor and all that, but some people don't make it quite as far. But I always say, like, how do you compete with a brain surgeon's income on a high school education, right? And really the only way that I can ever think of would be legal way, of course, would be getting a job in sales, right? And so, because you can scale up your income over and above, the degree that you might have, right? You might have a college diploma and something to get you started, but then you can, through skills building, you can really game up your income. And it's really hard, in other departments. For instance, if you're in the accounting department, they're going to want a certain level of education for every level that you go up, right? You can't just go from, accounting clerk to CFO, right, without having the requisite education, right? So that's my cheat code, right? And then I realized there's a super cheat code, which is that, you can do really well in sales over and above maybe any formal training if you own the company that hires the salespeople to do the selling, right? Because when you're in sales, you can leverage your own time and effort But when you own the business, you're leveraging both your time and the time of everyone that works for you, right? And so I approached the business in 1991, and I said, I see a new technology area blooming that I would like to focus on. And I approached them with kind of a deal about splitting off part of their business, and I would own some and they would own some, kind of an entrepreneurial kind of a suggestion, right? And they flat out refused me and said, no, you should just go back to work and do what you're doing. And so, I love to tell the story that the next day I resigned, right? And to start this new business, right? But what I had forgotten to do was tell my wife I'd only been married 6 days. And I went home on the Friday and I told her, oh, by the way, I quit my job. And she's like, what? We just got married last weekend, right? But nonetheless, I wanted to focus on an area which was mobile wireless communications, ergo the cell phone, basically in 1991. And I said, look, you guys don't really focus on that, but you have a couple of products. Let me take them and run with them. They said no. So I went off on my own and I found a couple of guys, one in Montreal, one in Ottawa, and we started this business focusing on companies that were building cellular networks, right? And so, of course, the cell phone never went anywhere, right? Like who needs a cell phone, right?
How do we live without them?
Yeah. And so anyways, to make the long story a little bit shorter, I sold that business in the early 2000s. The three of us sold it. It was an 8-figure exit. And I had an opportunity to start another business and doing quite similar, not exact, but similar a business to serving the same sort of markets, mobile wireless, cell phones, wireless communications. Again, more on the network side. So building the network, base stations, antennas, things like that, not selling phones or anything, right? But the difference on this one was that I'd realized some of the customer service elements were missing from our first company that I really wanted to focus on. And these were like softer skills and, about answering the phone, about how we get back to customers, about how we price things, certain core values around that. And I wanted to build the next company up from the ground up with those as core principles of the business. And so that was when I started Gap Wireless. And Gap Wireless is my initials, GP. And although my wife's name is Alyssa, the A is actually a vowel that I bought for so that I had to buy a vowel in order to make a word, right, with my name. and that's where I came up with Gap Wireless. And the funny story around that is that the same year I sort of came up with Gap Wireless in the mid 2000s was when the Gap clothing company introduced the Gap Wireless bra.
Oh,
and so
no.
we ended up having a huge trademark battle with the Gap clothing company over Gap Wireless, right? One thought it was a clothing item and one thought it was a communications business. So I ran Gap Wireless until 2022 and I sold it to NWS Private Equity in 2022. I worked for them for almost 3 years and then they, that kind of times out, right? And I left them in 2024 at the end. And because I kind of wanted to do the same thing again, but I had a very strong no compete, that was where I bought a business in Florida that operates the same, but is in a different technology space, different customers, different country, different vendors, different customers. Everything about it is different, but the business kind of runs the same. And so that it wasn't like I went from, a distributor to a SaaS company or, it's kind of the same business model. And so now I'm sort of on my third time's the charm. And I signed up with a Canadian AI company to represent their products and services in the US, trying to build demand for their agentic. They created agentic models, AI models around very specific needs for customers. And so we could dive into any of that. And that sort of spans the, 1982 to today, right?
Oh,
and,
my.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to start with your book, Never
Sure.
Sit in the Lobby, 57
Right.
Winning Sales Factors to Grow a Business and Build a Career, because that came out of the experiences that you've had thus far.
Yeah. So I learned early on, when I first started in sales, right? Because I went from like civil servant, where kind of everything works from a, very specific set of rules, and to this kind of free for all where you have to learn how to sell, how to get, act, and stay in front of your customers. And I started getting mentored by other salespeople in that company, the owners of the company. And I realized some of them were really quite good salespeople, and most of their success was attributed to doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same result, right? Kind of the opposition of the definition of insanity or whatever. They really were doing the same things over and over again, and it was working for them, right? And so I started writing them down, like these ideas and stuff. And then I started realizing that some of the things they were doing were the wrong things to do. And so I started writing those things down as well and giving them little names and stories to go around them and started sharing them with people. And over the years, I would tell the story of this or that or the different tips that are in the book, right? And then people are like, oh, you should write a book, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, fine, I'll do that one day, right? And of course, I never did actually until the pandemic. And at that point, I was in Canada, and Canada was on a very strict lockdown, and so had nowhere to go, nothing to do for quite some time. And I thought, what better time now than to take my book that had all these tips and all these little scribbles and things that I had and say, can I do it, right? And so I did what any person would do before ChatGPT, which was I Googled how to write a book, right? And of course, it was today, I'd just write the book for me. And, I'm just kidding, but but I'm half true, right? But in 2022, I Googled how do I write a book? And it basically said, the first sort of thing, I watched a video and the guy said, hey, he said, just write 500 words a day, every day until you have enough words and then you're done, right? And so I realized that I couldn't do that every day the way my work was. So I agreed to do 2,500 words on the weekend. And so that was what I did. And then I said, how many words do I need for a business book? And it said 75,000 to 80, something like that, right? And I'm like, okay, so I'll just write until I have 75,000 words and then I'll stop, right? So that's exactly what I did. Every weekend I was, on the lockdown in Canada, and every Saturday and Sunday morning I got up really early and I didn't stop until I had the 2,500 words, right? And the joke of it was that, I sort of sent it to the first editor that I'd, hired a service to help me to publish it correctly, package it, all that, right? And the editor it was a lady, she sent it back and she said, Glenn, you can't say the F word that many times in a book, right? And I'm like, oh, okay. And I like, okay, why don't we agree instead of 75, we'll agree on 71,000 words, right? And so we edited the book and it came out at like 71,000 words. I'm just joking. It's a bit of a joke there. But I was using very colorful salesman-like language and NSFW words. And I wrote the way I speak, right? And, and sometimes when you're in the locker room or you're at the water cooler and you're telling sales stories, your language can get kind of colorful, right? But anyways, we published it for, the broad audience, and it's about 71,000 words. And it's basically a bunch of tips on how I like to reduce it down is how to get, act, and stay in front of your clients and to be a pleasure to do business with always, even when you don't get the business. And so it's been a mantra of mine since I started the Gap Wireless in 2007. And it's a really important thing for me. And, and I was able to forge really good relationships with my customers and then my employees and also my vendors and even my competitors, right? And so I often point to the fact that I had some very strong competitors. Some of them were bigger than my company. Some of them were a little smaller than my company. But none of them were as much of a pleasure to do business with as we were. And even they would admit that it was true. Right? Like, in other words, you don't have to be a pleasure to do business with in order to do really well. But that was just the path that I chose, was that I wanted to try to do okay, but also be a pleasure at the same time. Right? Other people wanted to kind of have to be famous for how lack of being a pleasure they are, but they were still, you know what I'm saying? The difference. Yeah. And so a lot of the tips in the book are how to build real, genuine rapport with customers. Nice. Stuff like that, right? Yeah. And it covers a lot of ground, right? How to knock on the doors, how to talk to them, how to visit them, how to take them out to lunch, how to follow up, what to say yes to, what to say no to. And you can read any one of the chapters in any order and you'll learn something at any point. It's not a system where you have to start with process 1 and go to 57. You can start it anywhere in the middle and jump around and learn a tip or two.
As a business owner myself, I can tell you that finding the right people to hire is absolutely brutal. You post a job, get flooded with hundreds of resumes, but somehow still can't find anyone with the actual skills you need. It's like searching for a needle in a haystack, but not with ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter finds amazing candidates for you fast. And right now, you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/work. Here's what makes ZipRecruiter different. Their smart technology actually identifies the top talent for your specific roles super quickly. The moment you post your job, their matching system starts showing you qualified candidates immediately. Plus, you can reach out to your favorite candidates right away using their pre-written invite to apply messages. No more waiting around, hoping someone will notice your post. Ditch the other hiring sites and let ZipRecruiter find what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Try it for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/work. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/work. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Yeah. Well, that makes it fun too, because you can just
flip it open and
do that and then figure out, for those of you who are watching the video, I just closed my eyes and pretended I was pointing to a page on a book. But I love that. And I also think that what you're saying is so important because we have seen since the pandemic, particularly, and even the last couple of years with people unsure about new tech and AI and infusing that into our world, we see that people really want brands that are authentic, genuine, show their values. And part of that to me is being genuine, being kind, being a pleasure to work with, because that will help you retain customers for longer, help them want to buy more from you. So increasing their customer lifetime value. And that's how you get really good referrals too.
Yeah.
Because not only do you do great work, but you're also a pleasure to work with. So you're definitely, shouldn't be a surprise, but I think a lot of people don't go into business necessarily having that as one of their primary goals.
Yeah. And the other thing, you mentioned the pandemic, and the other thing that I've learned, and it's a tough lesson and a lot of people want to argue with me about it. So, but I do want to bring it up, is that a lot of people figured that when we went into the pandemic, when we came out of it, we inherited this ability to close big deals from the comfort of our home office. Mm-hmm. Right. And also that with AI that we can automate it all. Right. And so there are days that you can work at home, and that is true. Right. And you can use AI, and we can talk about that at any point, about how to lead generation or, crafting proposals, whatever. Right. But the real deals, the big deals, are always closed face to face. And if you want to make the big bucks, if you want to run the big companies, you have to meet with the clients face to face. You can't do it just with AI or just remotely, or it's a combination, right? And a lot of those things where we use AI and we working from home and stuff like that, that's marketing, not sales, right? The true sales is when you're in front of the customer closing the deal. That's what a salesman's or person's job is to close the deals. And people often argue with me, oh no, I do it. I sell SaaS. I never visit customers or whatever. And I'm like, that's possibly true, right? But there's a lot of other things other than SaaS out there that need to get sold. And I said, look, let's say you ran a SaaS company and they exited and you got $50 million and you're going to buy a private jet. I said, are you telling me that you would accept a virtual flight on your jet before you bought it? Or would you like to be picked up in a limo, driven to the airport, meet the crew, meet the cabin crew, meet the pilots, right? Then be served champagne, flown to Miami and back for lunch, right? On that private jet. Or can I just show you a video over Zoom and then you can give me $50 million, right? And the 50 million scales all the way down to 5 million, 500K, 50K, 5K. The principle holds true, right? Like if somebody's buying a $50,000 vehicle, they're going to want to drive it.
I would hope so.
Right? You can use all the tools to get them to the dealership to get in that car. But if you don't get them there with the keys and sit and smell the new car smell, you're probably not going to get the deal. Right?
Yeah.
And so
I think that's it's an interesting statement. It is always nice when most of the in-person stuff that I have is I do have one in-person class. I'm trying to go to campus for more of the orientations, the beginning of the year meetings, just to show my face a little bit more because I truly love teaching. But most of the in-persons I have are at conferences, honestly. And they're podcasting conferences or they're AI conferences. And so I'm seeing people for the first time or meeting new people. And it's in these short spurts, but it does make a difference in, I need to follow up with that person. I remember because I had a great conversation with them.
Right.
I will say, of course, podcasting, I do that completely remotely, but there's also the approach of looking at, what do I want this to become? So then how do I make it so that I can do more in-persons from a big studio and not just from my home?
Exactly.
Everything you're saying rings true. I think it is a lot of industry by industry, but there is nothing quite like, even if I have great rapport with a lot of people via Zoom because I'm on Zoom all day, every day. But there's nothing like that moment you get to meet them in person and shake their hand.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a bunch of rules in the book. I won't completely go into it right now, but about like there's certain things you can't do unless you're in front of them, right? Yeah. And one of my rules is always have something in your hand and something in your mind, right? And so let's say you have a new baseball cap or a water bottle, Stanley water bottle you're giving away, mouse pads or pens or, all the promo items, right? You've seen them all. And like, how can you give that to a client over Zoom, right? And so, or maybe they've asked for a quote or a proposal on something. Yes, you could give it to them over the internet, but you could also hand it to them, and then you could have something in your mind that you want to speak to them about, and then there's other rules that follow for me, right? Because I always want to get behind the curtain at the customer. And so that's why I have another rule called always ask for a mini tour. And that means when you get in front of the customer in the lobby and you've given them the water bottle and the quote and you said, hey, can I get your first impression on this quote? Or you say, you know what? Any way I could get a little mini tour of where you're going to be setting this up, where you're going to be working, where the team sits. I just want to see the environment and see how we can best position our product, service, or solution, to the environment. And what I want to do is get behind the door so I can see who else gave them Stanley water bottles and mouse pads and T-shirts and pens. Because I might realize that I am the underdog and they've got a corporate contract with IBM or HP or whatever, some other huge corporate customer, and I'm really coming from way behind. Or I realize there's 9 other things they buy that we sell and I didn't even know they use, right? Like, he's not going to tell me that on Zoom. I need to see it with my own eyes. Yeah. And so those are some of the most powerful things. And one of the hidden sort of gifts that you get from it, which some people don't realize until they're sort of doing it, is if you truly want to be in sales, not marketing, but in the sales, when you're actually in front of the customer, it ends up being the best part of your day, right? Like we all kind of fight it. No, I don't really feel like, putting on my suit or my whatever, leaving the comfort of my home office. But when you finally get to that customer and you get in front of them and you're actually doing what you're paid to be doing, which is being a salesperson, it actually is like performing on Broadway. You know what I mean? It's like it's your calling, right? And everything falls away. Like you might have problems, you might be in an argument with somebody outside, but when you get there, that's your space where you can really perform and you realize, hey, the best part of my day was making that call. You didn't want to go, but I went and I'm so glad I went. Now I have 3 follow-up visits. And so I challenge people to push themselves just to get out there. And if they say, well, I don't know what to go see them about, I say, hey, just bring them something in your hand and something in your mind. Nice. That's where the rule came from, right? So
yeah. And obviously you've had success using all of these tactics yourself. Did want to ask about your 2 exits. Did you always have the end in mind? Did you always know that you were planning to exit when you built these companies?
So on the first one, no, not at all. It came out of the blue, and we were renting space to a business in our business. They were running a small office in our bigger office, and it was a public company, and they came to visit that company, and they said, wait a minute, who are you guys? And they ended up buying us. And we got rolled into a public company. And so we kind of went public, right? And I'll come back to that in a second. The second business, of course, it ran for 15 years before it was sold. Along the way, private equity was much more mature of kind of a business model. And they started knocking on the door several years in, right? It was like, oh, you're not big enough. And then they would, someone else would come back 2 years later and they're like, oh, you're starting to look interesting. And, then a couple of years later, they're like, oh, well, what would you take this amount? And we're like, well, that's not enough. We've been at it for 6 years, 7 years, whatever, right? And so then we start to do the math in your head and you're like, okay, well, at this amount, they're giving you that amount, the multipliers. It's all multipliers, right? Whatever the bottom line is, you're multiplying it by either 3 to 5, 5 to 7, 8 to 10. It all depends on your EBITDA and whether you're sort of a resale model where you're just buying and selling products, and then, or whether you're a repeat business model where you have repeat customers, or whether you're recurring revenue like a cable TV or, something with a contract, right? Like a software as a service, or those are all have their own different multipliers, right? And so, although on the second one, we started getting a taste 3 or 4 years in, there were a lot of vicissitudes in the business, ups and downs of, where we're like, no, maybe we could sell, maybe we can't. But they always want to look at 3 years, right? And it wasn't until later in our life cycle that we could put 3 good years together at the same time and have an attractive average times the multiple would equal something that would be good to myself and my business partner, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
I just want to point out, when the public company bought us, myself and my 2 business partners, we all became multi-millionaires overnight, but it was in the form of shares in a public company. And this company was a household name in Canada in the cell phone business. And to make a long story short, they had bought a bunch of other businesses that didn't work out. And what was attractive to them about us was how much cash we threw off. And to make a long story short, they ended up bankrupting the business, and ultimately they went bankrupt. And I went from being a multimillionaire to broke in sort of one fell swoop, because I was an insider, because I had so many shares. I wasn't able to sell. I was locked in.
Wow.
And so I ended up giving away my business for millions of dollars and never getting nothing in return. That's why I created Gap Wireless and didn't retire. Otherwise, I could have retired.
Yeah.
And it was a huge and horrible lesson. But the fear of poverty was much greater than my fear of loss and my pain over the loss. And so I had to just go forward. And when the public company announced they were going into receivership, I just moved forward and started a new business. And when we sold in 2022, we sold for cash. And obviously, right?
Yeah.
And so no more shares. Thank you. Please and thank you, right?
Yeah,
So,
it's funny. So many companies do that, right? They offer shares, maybe shares and some cash.
yeah.
You have to stay a part of the team for 2, 3,
Yeah.
5 years. And even
Challenging.
small examples, because I've worked for myself, I've worked for agencies, bringing programs to agencies that I created and ending up in similar situation, leaving my IP, because then they're saying, oh, well, I did this, this, and this, so now you owe me if you want to take your IP back. And I'm like, I never gave you my IP, but I just want to
Right.
wash my hands of this. Or, saying, oh, we'll do a revenue split with you, things like that. So people really do, you do need to be cautious for these things, because even if you believe in the person or the company or organization that's promising you these things, a lot of times they are just false promises. And they may not know that at the time, but you have to, this is a hard lesson for everybody, no matter what price point you're at, as you mentioned earlier, really understanding that you have to look out for yourself, your loved ones, your livelihood first, and think about what is going to be best for you in that, not what's best for them. I think that's something that's a hard lesson, but we all learn.
And I thought, selling all for cash, that I had it all figured out. And then I realized that there's another element to it, which is that, when there's taxes, yes, of course, but more so that it was the ego adjustment that became required by getting taken over by private equity, because you end up needing to stay for a period of time, and they want your expertise and whatever, but they don't want your advice in a way, right? And so putting your ego at the door, and I went in knowing that my ego would be something to deal with, but thinking about it and living it are two different things, right? And so you really want to time it to a very sweet spot of 12 to 18 months at the most, and no longer, because it will run its course after that. And you don't want to be locked in for too long of a time, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So
That makes a lot of sense. Today, you are a LinkedIn top voice. You are a sought after speaker, telling people how to build successful businesses from the ground up, what they need to think about. What was, you said you wanted to do this again. So even though you had, your last company sold to private equity, you moved to another country, you bought a company. What prompted that? What did you think you could do that you didn't get to do last time around? Or I'm just wondering.
Oh, so, one, like, I'm from Greece originally. My genes are from Greece, and I feel like that's why I hate winter. And I don't know why I was born in Canada.
Yeah.
So I don't like the cold. And so the one thing that most people know about me more than anything is that I hate the cold and I love the heat, right? I said the next time I do something, it's going to be somewhere warm, That was one thing. Two, I learned over the 40 years in Canada working that doing it in Canada is fine and it's all great. Now I'm not going to say anything negative, but when you do it in the US, everything's 10 times bigger. Right. And so I would meet people that were my equal. Let's just give it let's give everyone this equal billing. We're both exactly the same. Right. I'm in Canada covering 3,000 miles of geography, and this guy's doing the same thing in Boston, and he's 10 times as big as
yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I thought, if I'm going to do it again, I'm going to do it in the US where the numbers are bigger. Right. And these are subtle and weird and hard to pinpoint, but it's more business oriented in the US than Canada. Right. So I thought, you know what, if I'm going to do it again, and I'm getting older, I don't have another 15 years. Right. So I want to do it where I can maybe get a bigger shot. And one of the other things was that I wanted to sort of do it on my own. 3 of us in the first business, 2 of us in the second business, and I wanted to do it myself. So yeah, that was what I wanted to do indifferently. Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I also realized that and you might cover this in some of your trainings of people and stuff, is that it's one thing to start a business. Like if you've truly invented the new mousetrap or whatever, the new software trap, mousetrap, whatever. But I realized there's tens of millions of dollars of companies out there that are really well run with owners that are 60, 70 years old, got no one to sell it to, kids don't care, blah, 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 whatever. Like, there's just no way I was going to do it from scratch this time. The first 2 companies were startups, scratch, from no customers, no insurance, no bank, no money, no nothing, right? And then this time I thought, I'm going to buy a small business that works the sort of same way as my other companies did. Distributors, buy products from around the world, sell them in the market, right? And sales, service, support, all that stuff. But one that also had a 20-year pedigree. So I bought a 20-year-old company from a guy who wanted to retire. He had, several hundred customers. He had, 10 employees. And then I was going to learn everything I learned growing my company that I sold, Gap Wireless, which we grew to $80 million in revenue when we sold it. So I learned a lot to see if I can take this smaller business and grow it somewhere. Doesn't need to go to 80 million, but I mean, to grow it somewhere along the way. And so that was sort of the genesis around the company. And yeah. And it's been going pretty good, and I love the weather. And, yeah.
Well, I also think there have to be, and this could be a whole podcast episode in itself, the differences between starting a business from the ground up and then coming in, buying a business already has a team, they work a certain way, already has customers, they're used to certain messaging, and coming in, and of course, you're going to put your stamp on it. You're going to shake it up a little bit. So how has that part of the transition been?
Yeah, so it's kind of like the equal and the opposite to selling your business to private equity and needing to go work for them. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like equal and opposite or whatever. And so, yeah, and I can say it I'll try to say it with as much grace as possible. Like 60% of the people that were there when I bought the business in January 2024, were cycled through in one way, shape, or form, right? And not to say they weren't good people, but they went on to do different things, and it's not like I'm hard to work with, right? And I believe that I'm extremely focused on creating a good environment for the people, but you got to expect that there's going to be a high, somewhat of a turnover with people that just don't get along with the new way. Because I changed everything, right? I put in a new accounting system, new ERP from the ground, like in a very elaborate and high tech ERP system. They were running on spreadsheets and bubblegum, right? And of course, it worked perfectly. And no discredit to them, but I wanted a full self-contained ERP system because I needed to know when I was back in Canada, for certain times of the year, whatever, I could see everything in the business, no matter where I was in the world, right? And so I put in a new logo, new marketing, new website, everything's brand new, and a new pricing model, new insurance, new everything has been, and it's like everything was fine. Why'd you change this? Why'd you change that? Right? And so, but I'm just doing all the right things that I think are the right things from doing it before that yielded me good results.
Yeah.
And the company's been growing modestly, and so I'm hoping that it is the right choices. But I knew if I just went in and just did the same thing exactly the same way as the old owner, I'd get the exact same results. And there's no lift for me if I do that, right? And then the other, sort of the third part of that triangle, if I'm thinking of what you're saying as a triangle, would be is, what do I want to do, like to position this company for exit or whatever? I realized in selling other businesses, there's certain things you want to do, but then there's other things you want to leave for the new owner to do. Because if you do too much, you won't get the intellectual property value out of it. And they'll just take it and put it in their pocket. Whereas if you let them do it, they'll get a lift from it, and they'll see a valuation increase just from buying your business and putting in some small changes. But you're thinking, no, I'm going to paint every nook and cranny in this place and make everything perfect, all the systems, all the softwares, all the people. And you want to allow them to get these early wins, especially private equity. And so you need them to buy something that functions really well, but there's things for them to do that can get quick lifts. And the M&A people are experts at this, but it's not intuitive to people that are positioning themselves before they have an M&A expert helping them.
A very non-business, well, a more personal example could be selling a house. Right? You might have it a certain way because that's the way you like it. And the realtor is going to come in and say, you need to do this,
Get rid of all that.
And then you do those changes to try to sell the property, but the chances are pretty good that the next person coming in and buying it are going to make their own changes as well.
Exactly.
So even if you spend a lot of money, great, you fix the roof, that's necessary. But just in my neighborhood alone, there's so many that happens. I don't want to say daily basis, but it happens quite often. And you go, oh, that house, they didn't move into that new house, even though those people painted and they did this, they did that, and they did the new gardening, and now you're ripping all of it out. And because you want to have ownership. You want to feel like you are part of it, not just that you're floating on top. Yeah,
exactly. Yep.
Well, I want to be cognizant of our time. We definitely are having further conversations on my other podcast. We'll bring you back on this one as well. Because to start getting into some of the other things that you do and where you're at, in another year's time with your business. I'd love to hear that.
Okay.
So
maybe you can invite me to one of your classrooms too, and I could talk to your students too. I'd love to do that if that's possible. So.
Yeah, that
awesome.
is definitely possible. So Glenn, I'm going to link your LinkedIn and your book. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave people with today before we sign off?
Nope. I think that's it. There's a tip in the book that I always like to end with, which if there's young people that are just building their careers, and the rule is you only get forever to make another impression. And so treat every impression like it's a first impression. And when you're at work and the boss is walking by or the big shots are in town or whatever, you always want to be having your best game face on, because some people don't realize the importance of it. And those are the moments when these people that have control over your career and how it will be governed and guided over time, that's when the decisions are made in their minds, who they're going to pick. And you always want to be their top draft pick. And so don't be on Facebook when the boss walks by, if I can put it in easy language, right?
Yeah.
And so treat every impression like a first impression, because in its own way, it really is. So, yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Awesome.
That's, I usually ask people for a quote. You just gave us a really great piece of advice. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for giving me your time today. I'm looking forward to diving into your book and having further conversations with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Anika. Great being here.
Thank you to everybody who's watching this episode or listening to it. I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share their story and their journey with you to make your life, your work life, your personal life a little better, a little more balanced, and for you to take that one step up every single day. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.